I stood frozen in that doorway. My husband. My best friend. Sharing chocolate cake like they hadn't just shattered my life. But that night, that betrayal? It didn't break me, it made me dangerous. What they didn't know was, I had a secret too. And I was about to use it. Optimism, when faced with change, acts like a lifeline, pulling us from the dark waters of uncertainty into the open, sunlit sea of possibility. It's not about ignoring the challenges that lie ahead, rather, it's about shifting our perspective, seeing them as stepping stones rather than insurmountable obstacles. As I stood in the doorway of that bistro, watching my husband feed chocolate cake to my best friend, my mind screamed with disbelief, my body frozen in place. The shock of betrayal crushed me, yet there was a flicker of something else too, something I hadn't expected. Deep within, a voice reminded me that the life I had built, the future I had imagined, didn't have to come crashing down with this one betrayal. There was more ahead, a new chapter, even if it felt impossible in that moment. Optimism wasn't about denying my pain, it was about trusting that even in the darkest times, there could be light. When change comes crashing in, like a wave that threatens to swallow you whole, it's easy to feel defeated. But optimism gives you the tools to fight the tide, to see the situation for what it is, a momentary disruption, not a final destination. For example, when I first walked into that restaurant, every fiber of my being wanted to turn around and walk away, to escape the truth. But the optimist within me recognized something. This moment didn't define me, it merely set the stage for the rest of my life. Sure, it was going to be tough. Sure, there would be pain and frustration, but there was also an opportunity to rewrite my story. Optimism meant leaning into that uncertainty, knowing that there were better days ahead. As I confronted Trey and Bonnie, my heart was torn apart, but the strength I didn't know I had started to grow inside me. The words felt like they came from a place deep inside, something raw, yet unbreakable. This isn't just about a cake or a betrayal, I told them, this is about my future. In that moment, the optimism I had clung to became more than just a mindset, it became a tool of transformation. It gave me the strength to hold my ground, to face the discomfort head-on and say, you may have taken this moment, but you will not take my future. Optimism isn't a passive thing, it's an active force. It requires us to keep our eyes on what's ahead, to make choices every day to push forward. And while the future might be filled with unknowns, that very uncertainty is a powerful opportunity for growth. Like someone facing a career change, the first steps are overwhelming. The job market is uncertain, the fear of the unknown looms large. But optimism helps you keep going, to not just survive the change, but to thrive in it. It helps you ask yourself, what new opportunities lie beyond this fear? What can I learn? How can I grow from this? In the midst of a career shift or any change, maintaining motivation is the real challenge. At that bistro, the shock I felt from seeing Trey and Bonnie together wasn't just about the betrayal, it was about the life we had built together that now seemed to be crumbling before my eyes. But as I took a step back and thought about it, I realized that my future was not in their hands, it was in mine. No one could take my dreams unless I let them. Optimism, then, wasn't just a feeling, it was the belief that the foundation I had built was still solid, that I could rebuild it even stronger. And so, I stayed motivated. The next steps were unclear, but I began making them anyway, filing paperwork, consulting with my lawyer, facing the reality of what needed to happen. It was daunting, but optimism kept me going. Every small victory in the process, a legal document filed, a conversation held, added to my growing sense of agency and control. I realized that every obstacle was just a new opportunity to become more resilient, more empowered. Adapting to new situations is never easy, but optimism gives us the flexibility to pivot, to embrace what's new instead of fearing it. With every phone call I made, with every step I took to expose Trey's lies, I was evolving. The more I embraced the idea that I could overcome this, that I could turn the page on a painful chapter, the more energized I became. Optimism didn't just fuel my actions, it reshaped my entire approach to the situation. Instead of sinking into despair, I used the challenge as a springboard to redefine my life. Optimism meant accepting that the path ahead might not be easy, but it was mine to choose. Through the emotional ups and downs, one thing became clear: optimism was the compass that kept me on course. It didn't guarantee an easy road ahead, but it ensured I didn't lose my way. The house, the betrayal, the public exposure, it all felt like the end, but in truth, it was just the beginning. Optimism helped me see that no matter how hard it got, I had the power to reclaim my life, to turn this setback into a powerful comeback. So, as I stood in my newly rearranged home, the place that had once symbolized everything I'd lost, I realized that this was the place where I was going to rebuild. I wasn't just going to survive the change, I was going to make it my own. Optimism had turned my pain into power, my uncertainty into an opportunity for growth, and my fear into strength. It's not always easy, but when you embrace change with an optimistic mindset, you turn the chaos of life into a beautiful, unfolding story of your own creation. And for me, that was just the beginning. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart sinking as I watched Trey feed chocolate cake to Bonnie, my best friend. It wasn't just a casual gesture between acquaintances, it was intimate, the kind you'd expect to see in wedding photos. His fingers lingered on her lips for a moment too long, and her giggle, oh, that giggle, ripped through me like a knife. I wasn't sure how long I stood there, paralyzed by the sting of betrayal, but the whispers around me soon snapped me back to reality. "Isn't that his wife?" I heard someone murmur. I should have turned around, walked away with dignity, and let the scene unfold in silence. But no. I couldn't. Instead, I walked towards them, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor like a countdown to the destruction of everything I had known. They didn't notice me until I was standing right there, casting a shadow over their cozy little dessert date. "Well, this is awkward," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Trey jumped, his face flushing red. "See, what are you, I mean, this isn't," he stammered, trying to gather himself. I cut him off, eyes locked on Bonnie, who was now wiping chocolate from her lips with trembling hands. The truth hit me like a freight train: this wasn't just about the affair. It was everything. 8 years of friendship, Bonnie. "This is how you repay me?" I demanded, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "We didn't mean for this to happen," she muttered, her voice small, unconvincing. "Things just happen. Like gravity. Like weather." I picked up their wine bottle, the same expensive brand Trey always said we couldn't afford, and poured myself a glass. "Fascinating," I muttered, savoring the bitter irony of it all. "See, let's not make a scene," Trey said, reaching for my arm, but I jerked away, my body trembling with a rage I could barely control. "A scene?" I asked, the words flowing from me like venom. "Like the scene you two have been making behind my back? How long has this been going on, Trey?" The silence that followed was deafening. I didn't need to hear an answer. The look on Trey's face, his inability to meet my gaze, told me everything I needed to know. Bonnie, on the other hand, shifted uncomfortably, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. "We were going to tell you," she finally said, her voice shaky, "when you finished planning whatever surprise you had up your sleeves." I froze. I had overheard Trey talking about a big announcement earlier that week, but it had never crossed my mind that it was this. Suddenly, everything clicked. The house, the vacations, the lifestyle we had built, it was all a lie. The life Trey and I had shared, the one I had fought so hard for, wasn't even real. The idea that my whole life had been built on this fragile foundation that Trey had destroyed in a matter of minutes felt like a betrayal of not just my heart but also my future. Trey straightened up, suddenly finding his courage. "We were going to tell everyone this weekend," he said, as if that would somehow make everything better. "We're getting married." The laugh that escaped my lips was hollow, sharp, like the sound of breaking glass. "Married? You're not even divorced yet," I shot back. "The papers are being filed tomorrow." Trey's expression faltered, but he quickly recovered. "We wanted to do this right," he said, as if it somehow made sense. "Right?" I repeated, my voice shaking with the weight of my disbelief. "Like sleeping with my best friend while I renovated our house was right? Like lying to my face every single day was right?" The glass in my hand shook, threatening to slip from my fingers. But I steadied myself, setting it down slowly before I could throw it across the table. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break in front of him. Bonnie reached out, her hand trembling. "We can all be adults about this," she said, her voice a soft plea. "Maybe after some time." "No," I said, cutting her off. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to take my marriage, my trust, and then ask for time to make it right. You've already made your choices." I turned to Trey, my voice now cold as ice. "You've both made your choices. You're no longer welcome here." I walked out of the restaurant, not bothering to look back at the shocked expressions behind me. The walk home was a blur. The phone buzzed in my pocket, text messages from Cameron, missed calls from Dad, but I could barely process anything. All I could think about was how Trey and Bonnie were probably still sitting there, planning their future in the house that I had built. They had no idea how wrong they were. The house wasn't theirs. It had never been his to claim. When I unlocked the front door, I ran my hand along the wallpaper I had carefully chosen, each inch of the house filled with memories, moments that were mine alone. I thought of the sacrifices I had made, the long hours spent working, the dreams I had built with Trey. And now, it all felt like a cruel joke. I had built this house with my hard-earned money, but it had always been under the illusion of Trey's name, the lie that he had so easily believed. The truth, I realized, was now mine to own, and I wasn't going to let him take it from me. The text from Trey buzzed again. "We need to talk about living arrangements." I smiled for the first time that day, a smile filled with a strange, newfound strength. I knew exactly what I needed to do. The next morning, as Cameron stormed through the door with 2 cups of coffee and a fire in her eyes, I knew things had changed. "So, spill it," she demanded. "You're texting me all night with cryptic messages, and now you're smiling?" "They're getting married," I said, taking a sip of coffee and letting the words sink in. Cameron nearly dropped her cup. "They what?" "They're getting married. Today," I said, a bitterness in my voice that I hadn't even realized was there. "And I've got news for them." We spent the next few hours gathering evidence, poring over documents, and getting everything in order for what I knew would be a battle for control of my life, my home, and everything I had worked so hard to create. Trey had thought he could break me. He had thought he could take everything I loved. What he didn't know was that I had one thing he couldn't take, my power. The confrontation that followed was inevitable. Trey walked in, his usual arrogance, but this time it faltered. The house wasn't his. The life we had built together wasn't his. It was mine, all along. "You've been living a lie, Trey," I told him, my voice steady and strong. "This house, everything you've taken credit for, was built with my money. My inheritance." His face paled as he realized I knew the truth. But I didn't stop there. The documents I had gathered, the proof of his lies, were ready. He had no idea what was coming. And as the days unfolded, with every phone call, every conversation, the walls around him started to crumble. Trey thought he was in control, but the truth was already out, and nothing he said could change that. In the end, everything he had stolen, everything he thought was his, was taken from him, by his own actions. And I stood tall, no longer the woman who had been betrayed. I was the woman who had reclaimed everything I was owed. The revelation of C's hidden inheritance was like a sharp turning point in the narrative of her life. In the chaos of betrayal and deceit, she had no idea that the key to regaining control lay in the trust her mother had set up for her long before C even understood its significance. The trust had been designed with foresight, its purpose as much about protection as it was about independence. It was meant to shield C from exactly this kind of situation, Trey's manipulation, Bonnie's betrayal, and the very real threat of losing everything she had built. At first, C had been unaware of her mother's planning, and she had lived in the belief that everything they owned had been the result of joint efforts between her and Trey. But now, standing in the aftermath of betrayal, she understood the deeper layers of her mother's wisdom. The house, the beautiful Victorian with its hand-carved moldings and perfectly restored hardwood floors, was not Trey's creation, despite his claims. It was, in fact, entirely funded through the inheritance that her mother had carefully tucked away in a trust for her daughter. The house, which had always been the symbol of their shared life together, was now a battleground, a symbol of C's strength and a powerful reminder of her mother's foresight. The emotional weight of this discovery was immense, and yet it ignited something within C, something she hadn't realized was there. As she stood in the foyer of her home, the realization that the house was not just property but a testament to her mother's protection filled her with a renewed sense of purpose. The house had never been a mere building, it was a sanctuary, a place of power, and it was hers to protect. No longer would she allow Trey to claim ownership of what was rightfully hers. The past betrayals would not define her future. This was her moment, her opportunity to step into the life her mother had envisioned for her all along. C's next step was clear. She needed to confront Trey, but she couldn't do it alone. Her trusted lawyer, Yael, was the perfect ally in this battle. Yael's legal expertise would help C craft a strategy that not only safeguarded her inheritance but also ensured that Trey could no longer manipulate the situation to his advantage. The trust had been set up with specific provisions, and Yael recognized its power immediately. It was ironclad, solid, and invulnerable to any legal challenge Trey could throw at her. Yael had been advising C for some time, but now, with the truth about the inheritance finally out in the open, they could put their plan into motion. Sitting in Yael's office, surrounded by legal documents, C could finally breathe. This wasn't just about the house anymore, it was about regaining her independence, her dignity, and her future. Yael's calm demeanor reassured her that they could win this battle. Together, they would confront Trey, not with fear, but with the unshakable knowledge that they held all the power. The trust her mother had set up was a shield, but it was also a weapon in the hands of someone determined to fight for what was rightfully theirs. The phone call from Yael was the moment everything began to align. Aurora, Trey's mother, had reached out. C had always been skeptical of Aurora's intentions, but this time, the conversation took a surprising turn. Aurora was ready to help. She had seen through Trey's lies and wanted to do whatever she could to make things right. This revelation was pivotal, it added another layer to C's legal strategy. Aurora's testimony could solidify their case, and with her support, they would have more than just legal documents on their side. They would have the truth, and that was the most powerful weapon of all. C's growing empowerment was undeniable. She wasn't just taking back what was hers, she was stepping into a future where she could finally claim ownership of her life. This wasn't about revenge or bitterness, it was about reclaiming her sense of self. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, "Your worth isn't in what you own or who loves you, it's in how you rise when life knocks you down." C had been knocked down, but she was standing taller now, ready to face whatever came next. She had already won this fight, because she had the truth, and she was no longer afraid of confronting the people who had once held power over her. As she prepared for the confrontation, C felt a sense of calmness wash over her. She had a plan, and she was ready to execute it. The eviction notice was in place, and the paperwork was solid. Trey might have thought he was in control, but C knew the truth, he was already defeated. The trust was hers, the house was hers, and with Yael's help, she was going to make sure that no one could take it from her. The day of the confrontation arrived, and everything went as planned. C stood firm in her resolve, backed by the legal documents and the support of her family. Trey's confidence wavered the moment he saw the property deed in her hands. It was clear that C had the upper hand. He had built a life on lies, and now those lies were coming back to haunt him. C's internal strength was evident as she calmly stood her ground. This was no longer about the house, it was about justice. She had fought for herself, and now she was going to ensure that the truth was heard. There was no turning back. With her mother's final gift, both the house and the strength to protect herself, C was ready to reclaim her future. In the end, it wasn't just about the material possessions, it was about the power of standing up for oneself. C's journey wasn't over, but she had already taken the most important step, she had claimed her power back. And now, as the dust settled, she felt a sense of peace. The house, her mother's legacy, was no longer just a symbol of betrayal, it was a symbol of her own resilience.